Well, that didn't sound very good. Don't be fooled by that stunt outside. This is a very nice neighborhood. But anyways, YouTubers, awesome stuff, and welcome to Londononion's humble home. Now, this time, we're going to be discussing a class comparison for Defiance 2050, but we'll discuss this in a more appropriate setting. Come on. Now, in this comparison, we're going to be discussing which class this onion thinks is the best overall. Keeping my own biases out of it as much as possible, I do understand that each class fulfills a particular niche, and we'd consequently be comparing apples to oranges, to pineapples to grapes, to bananas to kiwis, to onions. And I bet you can't guess the odd one out of that group. It'll almost be like multiple intelligences. Which class has the most of those intelligences, and to what degree? In other words, we're going to be looking at general performance characteristics that are common to each class to help determine which one fulfills them the most overall. Now, this comparison won't get deep into numbers as there are far too many variables to take into account. Also, comparisons will be made with the assumed loadouts for each class as per my past reviews. It is absolutely important to note that these comparisons will be based on class potential or the capabilities of their skills, not necessarily the playstyles I personally choose, as per my past reviews. Now, in the end, I'll rank each class with a score and determine what I think is the best class. So, the intelligences, or the factors of evaluation we're going to use are independence, team maintenance, offensive capabilities, and defensive capabilities. Now, I must note that I will value skills a bit differently in the event that there are ties in overall score. Independence will carry the most weight. Second will be offense, third defense, and fourth team maintenance. So without further delay, we'll get started. The first factor we're going to discuss is independence. Independence is an Arc Hunter's potential for self-preservation, versatility, and personal ability/tool buffs. So we're going to start with the Assassin. As a futuristic marksman that specializes in long-range combat and critical damage, the Assassin spends a good amount of time away from the heart of the battle, naturally minimizing interaction with their team and enemies. In other words, the class is naturally independent. Despite their specialization, they have potential for close-range combat effectiveness. The assumed loadout of the Assassin is a sniper and pistol. The pistol is the logical choice when fighting up close, allowing them to maintain some effectiveness. Additionally, the Assassin comes equipped with the Hidden Blade, if they so choose, allowing a strong melee response to close, weak enemies, and some tough ones as well. Lastly, the Assassin comes with their trademark skill, which, as explained in my Assassin review, can have many uses, whether they are offensive, evasive, or tactically based. For those who couldn't guess, I am referring to their stealth skill. Alternative playstyles, however, take a bit of a dive with this class. In regards to team maintenance, the Assassin does not seem to provide much support at all, aside from their optional Mark skill, which grants higher damage to a single target from all sources for a limited period of time. Offensively, the Assassin has a major spike in potential. As far as raw damage output goes, provided one has the accuracy and discipline, they can dispense extremely high damage, particularly with critical hits, in conjunction with their stealth skill, mark, and other offensively based skills. Hazard control, which I will define as the ability to eliminate tough enemies or bosses efficiently. Nobody else is better equipped than the Assassin, since their weaknesses lie with critical strikes. Due to the balancing tools available to an Assassin, particularly Biotoxin and Hidden Blade, handling crowds with an Assassin becomes rather simple, but for relatively short periods of time, which may be the only window they need to clear a crowd. Additionally, with their pistols and grenades, crowd control, although the hardest part about being an assassin, can be handled with ease. Defensively, the assassin really only has one tool, but it is extremely effective. Their stealth skill essentially allows them to disappear from the battlefield for 10 seconds, which is the perfect amount of time for recovery of any type of shield. Now, thorough evasion would naturally nullify most other defensive strategies, but sometimes evasion is not an option, such as one receiving heavy damage very quickly or being floored and briefly stunned. The assassin consequently has no other answer other than minimization by means of their independent tactics, that being distance. Guardians, on the other hand, have more variety in their playstyles, giving them some points in versatility. Additionally, the Guardian is known as the most stubborn class that never goes down and really has no obligation toward any particular weapon as long as they avoid snipers and pistols. Self-preservation is the definition of the Guardian, and this comes into play with their Mending Barrier, Bolster, and Steadfast, among other perks. Energize seems to be the only skill buffing perk, and garners minimal points in that particular respect. Now ironically, the Guardian is not much for team maintenance in that there are very few tools at their disposal to aid in buffing teammates. Their only option is the barrier and the one associated perk, Martyr. Otherwise, Taunt is their only alternative means of redirecting enemy attention, not including PvP effects. Just like team maintenance, the Guardian's offensive capabilities are quite limited as they have no weapon-based buffs and only one skill created as an offensive strategy, that being Shockwave. Otherwise, Heavy Hitter, a rescue kill perk, is all they have for 5 seconds. As for defense capabilities, this should really go without saying. Virtually every tier of skills has a defensive edge, and synergistically speaking, they create a tank of an Arc Hunter that is easily the hardest to put down. Alright, so now moving on to the Crusader. As I said in my Crusader review, this was the class that was dropped on its head when it was born and came out special, let's say. Ironically, with this special class, it is surprisingly versatile with the variety of perks, skills, playstyles, and use of the hammer. Although the class is melee focused without any buff toward particular weapon classes, this is double-edged in that essentially any weapon can be used and be given the same damage buff. The major irony comes with the uselessness of the hammer. Otherwise, the class covers all of its bases. Unfortunately, the inverse can be said about the team maintenance, as there are absolutely no skills or perks that have some kind of benefit for allies. Offensively, the Crusader has a healthy amount of options. Aside from the hammer-related perks, the Crusader has the potential to cruise at an extra 40% of damage provided they can kill or hit enemies fast enough. There is also the Bulwark, the Blitz, and the Meteor Smash at the Crusader's disposal. The only thing I would say takes away from the Crusader is their hammer, which is essentially broken in this Onion's opinion. The Crusader essentially has the same options defensively as they did offensively. Whether they are restoring health, absorbing and redirecting damage with the Bulwark Shield, reducing damage taken, increasing vitality, or blitzing for evasion, the Crusader impressively has many answers for defense purposes. However, the degree to which these defenses are effective is somewhat limited. So, moving on to our bread and butter, the Assassin. As we had previously discussed in our last review, the Assault class has the skills to have an answer to most situations. As far as self-preservation goes, their healing stim gives them a major advantage to enemy onslaught, as well as their sprint ability, however they decide to use it. I would classify it as one of those wildcard skills that have multiple uses, somewhat like the assassin's stealth skill. Long story short, the assault class is highly independent. Now, what tends to come with independence is a natural amount of selfishness. The assault class seems to possess a similar mindset to that of the crusader in that there are absolutely no team benefits provided by the assault class. The damage output of an assault arc hunter seems to hug the average range. They do have two options for increasing their offense, particularly with super melee and the close combat skills, but for very short periods of time. However, due to their independent skill buffs, these skills can be activated rather frequently. As a close quarters combat expert, the assault class naturally excels in sustained crowd control. However, they do have limited ability to have the same effectiveness against hazards. Defensively, the assault class takes some advice from the guardian and the assassin. The assault class has contingencies for self-revive, health regeneration, and stunning foes. This is highly effective for survival, especially for one that is built to be in the heart of every battle. Additionally, the sprint tactic is an effective evasive maneuver, provided there is cover available from small arms fire. The only aspect the assault lacks are health and defense buffs. So the combat medic is the one-for-all type, and puts most of their energy into aiding their team members. The combat medic has some potential to be independent, particularly in the area of self-preservation with their healing bot. As explained in the combat medic review though, the healing bot is not immune to damage and can be destroyed. Unfortunately, virtually all other skills are somewhat squandered without the presence of allies, aside from their revive spike, which is ultimately a skill of self-preservation. For team maintenance, this should all really go without saying. The combat medic seems to have the ability to buff everything about their teammates. They can heal their teammates, increase fire rate, reload speed, damage, and defense, among other selfless perks and skills. The combat medic seems to be the inverse of our other classes that prioritize others over themselves. The combat medic has limited options for offensive tactics other than Pistol Tactician and Inspire. Defensively, the combat medic has a similar story. Their main defense buff is their protection spike, which can be destroyed and lasts for 15 seconds. Otherwise, there are no evasive maneuvers. As for endurance, the combat medic has the revive spike as a last-ditch effort for survival should they be in danger of going down. Incapacitating a medic is not the difficulty, forcing their extraction, however, is. Now, on to our engineer, the plagiarist of the Arc Hunter clan. The engineer saw all the other classes and decided to make its own class off what was observed. The engineer takes a page out of everyone's book. Whether one is looking for different playstyles, wanting to have an answer to every circumstance, or just be a one-man army altogether, the engineer checks all the boxes. The amount of variety in the class skills allows one to either be independent or team-oriented, and even a hybrid if one so chooses. The engineer is competent in buffing their team, but not necessarily to the same extent as our combat medic. Engineers, if anything, have a greater focus toward buffing damage and defense without any attention to health, fire rate, reload speed, or other combat-related buffs. In this onion's opinion, though, the most impactful buffs are taken care of. Offensively, the engineer is rather intimidating with their Fury drone and the associated perks, as well as the mech skill, which allows 20 seconds of complete carnage. But even without the mech, the engineer is still an offensive powerhouse, provided they have allies. On their own, however, their offense spikes in bursts. Crowd control is simple. hazard control requires the correct skills to be efficient. Defensively, the engineer has few but very effective skills at their disposal, the main ones being logic and mech. I don't think it is even possible for an engineer to go down while in the mech suit. And logic grants a small window of immunity from damage, then it goes into reduction. The engineer also has micro thrusters, just like our assault class, for faster movement to use as they wish. With its short duration and cooldown, the uses are just as versatile. So finally, our Demolitionist, the less refined powerhouse of the bunch, the savage brother of the assassin. The Demolitionist wants nothing more than to cause carnage. Unfortunately, the Demolitionist does not consider much else than different ways to blow up a target. Their versatility is present but minor, as playstyles are purely limited to demolition prowess. There's virtually no capacity to self-preservation and a few skills that grant some self-buffs toward explosives and their chosen weapons. This class is likely to require assistance in regards to health and defense. Much less can be said about team buffs, as none of the class skills contribute to the well-being of their team. Offensively is where the Demolitionist has a complete field day. Virtually every skill is to an aggressive end. Everything from grenades to launchers to detonators receive buffs to maximize their damage and performance. This is culminated with hatchling spawner and cluster projectiles, which turns every explosive into a cluster of explosives, highly effective against crowds and hazards. Now defensively is where the Demolitionist struggles again, as their only defensive or evasive maneuvers are flashbang and drop and roll, which leaves a grenade at one's feet upon performing a roll. Evasively, the flashbang is a Demolitionist's only option, with drop and roll as a means of mixed evasion and offense. So, there you guys have it. So moving on to our ranking. Their overall scores are 13 out of 20 for the Assassin, 12 for Guardian, 12 for Crusader, 12 for Assault, 11 for Combat Medic, 16 for Engineer, and 9 for Demolitionist. Now, 3 of our classes came up with ties, and that is the Assault, Crusader, and the Guardian. However, based on the amount of weight I give these factors, I have ranked them accordingly. The Assault has the highest independent score, so consequently I give it a slight advantage over the Crusader and the Guardian. And now between the Crusader and the Guardian, I rank the Crusader slightly higher because they both match each other in independence, and although it takes a loss in team maintenance is valued the least. The Crusader, however, has a major advantage over the Guardian in offense, which takes second place in terms of weight. Lastly is defense, which holds third place in total weight, and the Guardian has just a slight advantage. So although they are matched in overall score, the Crusader has more weight on their side, so I give them the slight advantage over Guardian in terms of overall performance. Now, just from looking at these numbers, it is easy to draw incorrect conclusions about the combat effectiveness of each class. After all, I would not say that each of the factors for evaluation are of equal value. Ever heard of the saying, the best defense is having a good offense? But I never really hear of the inverse, that a great defense is a good offense. Based on my playstyles in my past reviews, some of you may wonder why I value offense over defense. To be clear, the scores in this comparison are not what I value, but instead what Defiance values. When the scoreboard comes up, those that are most valuable are the ones who did the most damage. Personally, I am concerned with my own well-being, and take on more independent and defensive playstyles. Defiance, however, does not value one's survival as much as their carnage. Now, some of you may have the fair question as to why independence is valued over offense, given what I was just explaining. And the answer is very simple. If one is only offensively capable under very particular circumstances, then the entire efficacy of that character gets called into question. If one cannot adapt, if one cannot remain offensive with their skills and with the variety of skills and perks that they have at their disposal, then their independence is ultimately what is holding them back. But even that is simply conjecture. Based on these numbers, I would say it is fair to conclude that the engineer is easily the class with the most intelligences, so to speak, but not the best under every circumstance. In second place would come our assassin. In third place, assault. Fourth place, crusader. Guardian. Fifth, combat medic. Sixth, and last, the demolitionist. So all of the other Arc Hunter classes, aside from the engineer, are simply specializations, and the engineer is like the line of best fit, therefore it holds first place. Another minor note, I did not take synergies into much consideration, especially once they are maxed out, which could alter the efficacy of the classes. Each class has the potential to outperform each other. These numbers mainly suggest which ones have the higher advantages over others based on their abilities and tools. Aside from all that though, that is pretty much all this onion has to say. You have been such great company, and I will see you another time.